This is Logical Fallacies as Informational Shortcuts by Luciano Floridi, who is a rather like prominent philosopher nowadays, Italian guy, informational ethics, and he's like, consulted with a lot of big tech companies like Google and stuff in the past. But yeah, so this is in Synthes. Unreal says Southern Europeans at least don't eat dinner until like 11 p.m. I hear, so they can stay up and they have digesting to do. Yeah, I mean, I know some of the people are in darker areas, so yeah. DCI said, why are you tired? I was watching Aris chat about buttholes shirtless. I was looking at Taco Bell Quarterly with no gray zero. Yeah. I mean, this is one of the problems. I used to stay up to watching Twitch way too late at night on certain days when one of my favorite streamers was up late, and I'd be dead tired on like Tuesdays or whatever. And it didn't matter. I was like, well, whatever. Like, if I'm tired one day of the week, but like, it fucks up your sleep. Adam says, how are you looking at Kripke's name and necessity? Are you adding it to and modifying Kripke's theory based on Hintiga's views? Maybe a question, talk about this later. Yeah, I don't do anything according to Kripke. I am like full Hintika, so I don't modify Kripke's view. I just don't use it. I actually have my own theories of reference that because I don't want to use rigid designators, or at least not in the way Kripke does. But like, yeah, anger rage, yeah. He does or did teach at Oxford. Yeah, he's been, I think he's got an appointment at Yale, but I think he's basically jet set philosopher nowadays, going around and like, consulting on like, AIs and, like search engines and all that shit. Okay, but this is Logical Fallacies as Informational Shortcuts. So let's see what Floridi has to say. A greener approach to logic. When it comes to managing ontic resources, okay, so again, this is like, all right, we're throwing out the big words right now. No one in their right mind, outside of philosophers and maybe a few other people, know what ontic is going to mean. Ontic is from ontos, or the like old word for being. Like ontology is a study of being. So it's like straight up, we're going hard metaphysics immediately. When it comes to managing ontic resources, philosophy may be notoriously prodigal. Prodigal. Wow. All right. Crazy first sentence. What's up, Luminance Bloom? How you doing? How you doing? We're going early on the paper. We are. DCI suggested it, and we're doing it, and DCI is in Europe, so I'm trying to get the paper fast. So we're doing, well, you can see it right here. Logical Fallacies and Informational Shortcuts by Floridi. Ontological status is being, yeah. So if anyone doesn't know our buddy Luminance, who is currently doing a speed run of the Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. He's streaming usually on Sundays, Metaphysics, this Critique of Pure Reason, and on Thursdays is going to be doing some poetry. But like, yeah, go give him a follow if you're interested in like, smart discussion. He's a continental philosopher, just finished his doctorate in like Heideggerian philosophy, so like good stuff. Kant that lol dude. Yo, what's up, Retheus? How you doing? Lumen says, I had to send the raid to Prof for the raid-a-thon. Of course, we're all going to raid Prof later. But I can't miss the Phil Roulette. I appreciate it. Retheus says, put Alexander Hamilton and Kant in the room and lock the door. Fight. Yeah. Okay, but yeah, so we've just started. When it comes to managing ontic resources, philosophy may be notoriously prodigal. One only needs to recall Plato's world of ideas, Popper's third world, or Lewis's possible worlds. Yeah, we make up universes. Always fun is if you read Frege, who also had a third realm, but of course the word for realm in German is Reich. So Frege had a third Reich before he was anti-Semitic and racist and all that stuff, but it was, and before the Nazis. So, but like shit like that happens. Okay, but when epistemic and logical resources are in question, the nature and scope of what is knowable and the limits of what is acceptable as formally valid, the problem may rather be some excessive profligacy. Big words, profligacy. Yeah, so this is running into Occam's razor. You don't want all the fucking things when you're talking about logic. You want it to be manageable. Same with your knowledge. You want your knowledge to be manageable. So don't do that. There may be lots of things out in the world, but you don't want it to be too many, but like you can do with a lot. Yeah. Wait, what? Tindaris. Yeah, Frege used Third Reich as a term. That's how it was written in his old logic books. Had nothing to do with politics, though, at the time. All sorts of radical skeptics, rigorous empiricists, and dogmatic rationalists seem to be bent on throwing away far too much. They waste what could be otherwise saved or recycled, both in terms of what we probably do know and in terms of what we might have a decent right to conclude. In this paper, I wish to help to redress the situation. I will argue that logic has been guilty of an ungreen policy by considering some formal logical fallacies as absolutely worthless rubbish, only fit for the conceptual junkyard, thus wasting their potential contribution to our informational processes. I will suggest that there is a greener and much more reasonable interpretation of such fallacies, which shows that they can be rather useful, if quick and dirty, and probably riskier, ways to gain and manage one's information. Some logical fallacies are not mere mistakes of no value, but informational shortcuts that can be epistemically fruitful if carefully managed. Okay, so Floridi's taking the line that, yeah, you can formally reason in certain ways, but there are heuristics that aren't perfect that work, and that many of our fallacies are really just of that sort. What's up, Chocolate Mint? Ontic spamming. Yeah, really. Philosophers definitely ontic spam, or some of them at least. Chocolate says, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Yeah. But to be fair, that makes Horatio seem very sort of minimalistic. So, yeah. I mean, maybe Horatio is a minimalist. I don't know. Yeah. So, Darius, I bet what you're responding to is Frege's third realm. Frege was basically a Platonist about math, but he wasn't like a straight Platonist, so he wasn't going to say the world of ideas. He said, where do ideas come from? There must be a third realm, which is basically his version of Platonism. So yeah. Which is like, pretty standard fare for a philosophy of math. Okay. What are logical fallacies? There is no ultimate and complete agreement among logicians or philosophers on a very tight definition of what a logical fallacy is. Oh, actually, I should mention, I actually think almost all logical fallacies have exceptions. Almost all of them. Like, the idea that, like, there's logical fallacies is, under formal rules, sure. But, like, there's almost always a case where they can be used, and where like there's the presuppositions that make them wrong might be in question. So if you're in a system that says you can't reason this way, well, you can also change the system. And if you can change the system in a certain way, then the things that were fallacies in that system are no longer fallacies. Maybe they get converted to something else, like a similar fallacy. It's like, fallacy prime or whatever. You just have to change around a little bit. But fallacies are inherent to their reasoning systems, and if you change that reasoning system, which can happen, then the fallacy doesn't exist as it used to. Lumen says, big fight between him and Husserl on that, and ultimately Husserl will decide that he won. Yeah, well, sure. I mean, I'm on Husserl's side too. I'm not thinking like ideas come from the third realm. There's too much wrapped up in Frege's sort of like what he decides is true, like what he understands to be true, and how things are put together in his like ontology. But yeah. Oh, Husserl decided that Frege won. I wrote poorly. I was wondering who the reference of the he was in that. Yeah, when Husserl decided that he won. To be fair, I mean, we could go criticize Husserl on Heideggerian grounds for being too Cartesian and, like agreeing with Frege on this, that there's like some other realm or whatever. So it's like, sure, Husserl should have dug his heels in. So, oh well. Okay, so yeah, I was just saying, no one actually has a good definition because, like I was just saying, they're tied to the systems of reasoning. In the system, you're allowed to reason certain ways. If the system changes, then you're not going to have to reason that same way. This is so partly because opponents like to use the expression flexibly in order to throw dialectical mud at each other, and partly because a large variety of errors in reasoning is often diagnosed as a logical fallacy. The result is that there is no fixed taxonomy either. However, for the purpose of this paper, the following might provide a good starting point. Luminance continues, before that, Husserl was psychologist about logic, and Frege convinced him about the need for some kind of Platonic realm about number. Yep, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's fair. I think I heard you speak on the history that maybe even Husserl had some doubts about his psychologism before Frege, but yeah, I mean, later Husserl definitely was, in giving up the psychologism, he went sort of Fregean and Platonist about saying like, all right, you need something else, but again, there should have been a different direction to go. Okay, so we're going to define logical fallacy. A logical fallacy is defined as any possibly unnoticed, deductively invalid or erroneous argument with the appearance of validity or a demonstrably false conclusion from plausible reasoning. So it looks good, but you fucked up. That's what this one says here. Like, okay. Luhmann says ultimately he still goes in his own direction since you have to use phenomenology to get to that realm of numbers. Yeah, I mean, I tend to like Husserl more than Frege and stuff. No, that's fine. I like to talk about Frege and Husserl. Okay. If logical fallacy or a working definition sufficiently similar to it is acceptable, the next step usually consists in distinguishing between two types of logical fallacies. So we got informal logical fallacies and formal logical fallacies. Informal logical fallacies are really mistakes in argumentation, such as begging the question, in ignoratio elenchi, argumentum ad hominem, and so forth. What is wrong with them is something in their semantics or in their strategy, not so much in their essential structure or form. ILF's, the informal fallacies, will make a brief appearance later in the paper, but they are not its subject. Okay, and like this is what I was saying. Argumentum ad hominem. Sometimes it is right to criticize the person. Sometimes they don't know what they're talking about, and so that they're arguing, it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, well, my argument might be good. You don't even understand the words coming out of your mouth. How am I supposed to take your argument seriously if you don't even understand the words? You're just parroting some bullshit, and I can't even... Like, you don't believe it, you don't understand it. It's like, why am I arguing with you? You're just doing that. If I actually want to argue with someone that knew what they were talking about, I'd go do that. This person can go fuck off. Like, there's no reason wasting your breath on people that are arguing in bad faith, even if they sound like they're saying something smart, because you can't actually engage with them. So, like, there are definitely times when you just be like, I'm not dealing with you because you suck. And I have no problem saying that. And I know some people have a problem, be like, well, why can't you be like, engage with the argument? It's like, no, it is not worth my fucking time. That is correct. It all costs money. Men don't fart. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't even know what an ignoratio elenchi is. I mean, an elenchus is where you've got suppressed, maybe that's just the using suppressed presuppositions for your argument. So you're arguing, but you're like hiding some of your premises. And so maybe like that's just what the fallacy is, that you're trying to hide what you're actually doing. I didn't know that Latin though. Okay, what concerns us here are the formal fallacies. Their problem is entirely morphological. In particular, the two best known schemes of formal logical fallacies are denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent. Okay, so we're talking about, like if P then Q, and like people are fucking up the logic of modus ponens. Okay, and in the rest of this paper, we shall concentrate our attention on them. An old and influential tradition has denounced both as just basic and simple errors, weeds in the logical garden, to be eradicated as quickly and thoroughly as possible wherever they occur. Pace Aristotle, this might not be such a good idea. Oh, it's straw man. Okay, looked it up. Ignoratio elenchi. Okay, so it's more not that I'm using premises that are bad. It's that I'm accusing you of using premises that are bad. So it's like I'm just straw manning someone by you saying that they have bad arguments. But yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, do formal logical fallacies provide any information? Answers to this question can be grouped under two headings which are not mutually exclusive. A. No. Considered as plain and obvious errors, formal logical fallacies are normally dismissed as providing zero information. And B. Yes. As errors, formal logical fallacies show meta-theoretically that individuals make systematic mistakes and that human reasoning is faulty. Okay, so yeah, it's like, yeah, people aren't automatically using formal deductive logic, so we're up to something else and we can see what they're up to doing that. Chocolate says you're winning a different argument than presented. Yeah, well, the elenchus is it's like you're like the elenchus is the back and forth. So if you're saying ignoratio elenchi, it's like you're ignorant of the argument. So it's like that actually makes sense. So it's like you're ignorant of what actual argument is going on. So you are arguing against something that isn't there. Yeah. It all costs money says, I'm building credibility here, fight me. Well, yeah, I believe you. Everything you've said is 100% correct. So you are building credibility. Why would I fight you? Okay. Yeah, elenchus is the back and forth style argument. I was thinking of enthymeme. I apologize. I just said something wrong a minute or two ago. My bad. Okay. On A, there is of course a vast literature in logic and critical thinking, but no significant advancement has been made since Aristotle condemned logical fallacies to the dustbin in his De Sophisticus elenchus. See, elenchus again is the style of argument that they were making. So it's of the sophisticated arguments. On B, the literature is equally vast but less unanimous. In cognitive science, developmental psychology, and neuroscience, a wealth of experiments, at least since the 60s, has shown allegedly that humans are not so rational, or not as rational as they like to describe themselves. Yet in this context, there is also a rather annoying tendency to oversimplify and reduce a variety of ways and styles of rational thinking to problem solving, the latter to logical reasoning, and this to conditional reasoning. Thank you for the lurk, Caudillo. I hope you're doing well. I hope your gaming is going well. I see you streaming. No, I see the announcements of your streaming sometimes. Usually not in a position to watch, but yeah. This reduction may be questionable to say the least and misleading, as semantic and social interpretations of the Wason selection task seem to show. The Wason selection task is one of those, like, you've got a bunch of cards and like you know something about like the cards. Is like, well, if you see this on the like flipped over on this card, then what will the other cards, like if you flip them over, be? And it's one of these, you have to like be careful about your reasoning there. And it's one of these, everyone gets it wrong without actually knowing a lot of formal logic. So yeah. Where was that? Okay. On the whole, however, Stein still provides a good survey and a widely accepted conclusion about B, so let me quote him at length. Quote, according to experiments done over the past few decades, humans make significant errors in various realms of reasoning. Logical reasoning, probabilistic reasoning, similarity judgments, and risk assessment, to name a few. Together, these reasoning experiments are taken to show that humans are irrational. Some philosophers and psychologists have developed creative and appealing arguments that these experiments are mistaken or misinterpreted because humans must be rational. I attempt to show that these arguments fail. Cognitive science can and should play a role in determining whether or not humans are rational. End quote. Stein might be right, but the story is probably a bit less discouraging, as I will try to show you. Adam says, don't count cards in Vegas. Well, you could, but there's consequences while being at a casino. Yeah. My old advisor, well, Hintika's wife was my old advisor. Jaakko Hintika, his wife could count cards. And I think I've told the story before, but the casinos found out she could count cards, like they caught her. But the funny part was, she didn't get thrown out of the casinos. She got whitelisted as a card counter because she never went in and tried to win a lot of money. She was just fucking around and having fun. The thing was, when a woman would be sitting at a poker table or a blackjack table and winning, all the people around her, all the guys, would get angry and start betting like assholes because they wanted to like do better than the woman. And the casino made more money having her there than they would have if she wasn't playing, because all the people around her were betting like jerks. So she was one of these like house allowed players because she would actually make them more money whenever she showed up, because she wasn't trying to take the house for anything and everyone else just paid through the nose. Lumen says, that's amazing. Interest, yeah. Men continue to be their own enemies. Yeah, interesting. Yep. So, I mean, context matters. And the casinos, they're in the business for money. It's not illegal to count cards, but again, it's private property. They don't have to let you on their property if they know you're a card counter. I mean, no one can stop you from counting things. All right, 4. Formal fallacies and their explanations. Formal logical fallacies are the dark side of valid inferences. DA is supposed to be a rotten variant. Okay. Denying the antecedent is supposed to be a rotten variant of modus ponens, while affirming the consequent may be seen as a modus tollens gone wrong. This can more easily be appreciated visually by looking at figure 1. So we've got figure 1. All right, we'll get down to that in a second. In a study now classic, Marcus and Rips presented participants with examples of modus ponens, modus tollens, denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent, and asked them to judge each argument as either valid or invalid. Results showed that participants often incorrectly judged modus tollens as invalid and incorrectly judged I can never remember the denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent as valid. There are two standard positive explanations about why participants accept fallacies as valid inferences. Okay, this is modus ponens. This is the standard thing. If P then Q, P therefore Q. That's this one here. Oopsie. What's going on? Come on. This is modus ponens. This is the normal thing that you see everywhere. If P then Q, P therefore Q. Denying the and then modus tollens here is the other correct one, where if P then Q, not Q, therefore not P. So you might hear this as like sort of disjunctive syllogism. They both fall to this sort of thing. But you've got this one or the other, and you're denying one of them, so it must be the other one. And that's what it is. Then you've got denying the antecedent. So it's if P then Q, not P, and then it's therefore Q. Well, if P then Q, and you say not P, you can't conclude anything. You just know if it was P, then it was Q. But if not P, you can't tell that Q or not. You just don't know at that point. And affirming the consequent is the same thing. So it's if P then Q, Q, well, then P, no. What happens is it's like, well, if something happened and it has multiple sources, well, then not necessarily any one of them happened. Like there could be multiple ways something could be realized. And so just because the outcome happened, you can't assume you know what led up to that. Contrapositive is always true. In classical, classical logic, yes. I mean, again, it depends on your logical system. I was making this point earlier. Depending on your logical system, you can have a whole lot of things happen that are different from this, but classically, contrapositive is fine. So yeah. Modus tollens does feel weird. Yeah, I mean, in chocolate, the truth is, you need to have classical logic for like the standard logic you get taught in school for all these to work in the normal way. You just don't see it as much though. But it does hold. Like it's fine. It's just less common. And usually unless you're doing formal logic, there's usually other ways to phrase things that are more common that make more straightforward sense. So you wouldn't use modus tollens, if you're writing like non-logical stuff. Just phrase it differently so that you say it in a way that makes more sense to people. That's why it's not there. That's it. Okay. Following a stronger informational reading, the first suggests that participants mistake only if for if and only if, treating if it is square, then it has four sides, as the same as if it is water, then it is H2O. This was already Aristotle's view. The refutation, which depends upon the consequent, arises because people suppose that the relation of consequent is convertible. Since after rain the ground is wet, in consequence, we suppose that if the ground is wet, it has been raining, whereas that does not necessarily follow. Yeah, so people in conversational stuff may not use the formal, like what we think of as the correct way of saying it. They may mis-schematize what we're saying. Just the if this then that. They may think if this then that, and if that then this. Like if and only if. That's fair. People are not all trained to like perfectly pick out or schematize natural language in the same way as someone trained in this, like a linguist or a philosopher. Okay. The other, based on a weaker informational reading, holds that participants mistake necessity for probability. The two theorems, the two explanations may not be incompatible. To see why, we need to rely on Bayes' theorem. Where is Ivan when you need him? We've got some Bayes analysis. A lot of math as if and only if. Yeah, chocolate, but like most people aren't doing a lot of math. Like, and even the kind of math, even if they do lots of math in their everyday lives, they might not be using like the formulas like a mathematician does. They might just be using like, equations. And they don't need to be worried about if and only if this, if and only if that. They just say, okay, this is how we manipulate the equations. DCI says, like taking all fish live in the sea to, if it lives in the sea, it must be a fish. That's right. Yep. Yeah, the full formula. Okay, yeah, we've got the full formula here. What's up, K-Pars? Bayes' theorem. Bayes' theorem calculates the posterior possibility of event A given event B. That is, the probability of A given B, on the basis of the prior probability of A, that is, the probability of A. Basically, it tells us what sort of information can be retrodicted, backward predicted. The well-known formula is this thing, and this is why I don't do formal stuff here, because I'm not reading this shit out loud. It's impossible. K-Par says there's a simplified version, but this one has a more natural interpretation with sensitivity, specificity. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, because you don't always get this stuff over here, it looks like. This AC, whatever that shit is. Okay, let us consider a simple example. Suppose Jill receives many emails, but only a few of them, say 2%, are infected by some software virus. She uses a rather reliable antivirus software, which is successful 95% of the time. The latter does not erase her potentially infected emails, but moves them to a special quarantine folder in the email client software, which Jill can check. Jill wonders how often she should check it for good emails. The question she is implicitly asking, what is the probability that A, the email was infected, given the fact that B, the email was blocked by the antivirus and placed in the quarantine folder, when on average 2% of all the emails I receive are actually infected and my antivirus is 95% successful 95% of the time. That is, it provides only 5% false positives. If the chance that some email is in the quarantine folder might not be infected is very low, then she will check it only occasionally rather than regularly. Suppose Jill runs an ideal test on 1 million emails. The result is shown in figure 2. The chance that an email might be infected before being blocked by the antivirus is 2%, but the chance that an email in the quarantine folder is actually infected is roughly 28%. Clearly, Jill should check her folder regularly. Okay, so this is the numbers. So if you run it through this, the number 2% infected off 1 million will be 20,000 and 980 will not be infected. Of these, 19,000 will test positive correctly and 49,000 will test positive falsely. Thus, out of 68,000 positives, 19,000 are actually infected, or 28%. So chance of infection before testing is 2%. Chance of infection after testing positive is 27.9%. That's not great, It's not great. I mean, that means you've got 72% and change are going to be legit emails, or at least not infected emails. Okay, and they looks like they grabbed this off someone's 2005 applet. Because it is funny, it's just, a little bit of history. Y'all remember when web apps were called applets? I wonder if some of you may not even been old enough. You could be in the stream. You could be 20 years old. You were born in 2005. You may never have heard that term, applet. Yeah, Internet 2005, exactly. K-Par says, sensitivity being the ability to detect more false positives, fewer false negatives, and specificity being the ability to exclude other cases, less false positives and more false negatives. Cool. Luminance says, dang, I don't think I remember that. Yeah, well, you're old enough, Luminance, you might, but that's how shit used to be called applets in Web 2.0 days. Yeah, you had the Web 1.0, and then I remember Web 2.0, where you started getting a little bit more sophisticated stuff, and so you had Java applets. Yep. Old. Had to install Flash and Java to run it. Exactly, DCI. Bayes' theorem and the AC fallacy. Jill is a smart girl. Maggie, a friend of hers, is not. She uses the same antivirus and receives roughly the same number of emails with approximately the same quantity of infections, but when Jill explains to her that she should check her quarantine folder regularly, she is astonished. For she thought that if the email was infected, then the antivirus blocked it, and since the quarantine folder contains only blocked emails blocked by the antivirus, then all the emails in it must be infected. More formally, she reasoned that if A then B, B therefore given B, therefore A. Yeah. Chocolate Adam says, I remember using Netscape in 2000. Yep. Netscape Navigator. Chocolate says, I think it is pretty valid to dump a copy to the Internet Archive to cover link breaking. Windows 98, yep. Yeah, so okay, your premises are if A then B, and then you conclude therefore A, which is, what's it called? That's AC, affirming the consequent. Jill explains to Maggie that the previous inference is a typical fallacy, affirming the consequent, but that she should not feel silly at all for considering Bayes' theorem once again. Look at the formula for given A, probability of A given B, where AC, the absolute complement, is just another notation for not A. So the probability of not A, or the complement of A given B, indicates the probability that the antivirus blocks the email B when the email is not infected, AC. Suppose we have perfect, infallible antivirus software. This will generate no false positives, no mistakes. But if there are no false positives, that is P of A given B is 0, and P of B given A is 1, and Bayes' theorem is degraded to a double implication. So we've got A if and only if B, and B therefore A, which is what Maggie perhaps had in mind. She thinks it doesn't fuck up, so the fact that she was confused about its error rate means that Bayes reduces an if then to an if and only if. Hey Flu, what's up? Let's step back to that built-in AOL browser back in the mid-90s, like 96. You youngsters in Netscape, Mosaic, Gopher, Fido, and old fart cred. I'm old enough. I remember that shit. Don't worry, Flu. Like, yeah, the AOL things. You got to remember, like, the AOL loading where you had, like, forums and links and, like, you go to, like, AOL was just basically doing HTML 1.0. Links, oh my god, I haven't heard that in forever. DCI says, I'm sure there's still reminiscent Usenet. Pages you could discuss on that, yeah. Keywords, man, keywords. Yeah, people don't realize before Google and the search engines, what we really had were Yahoo and directories, and so you had to have some idea. It was kind of like looking through a directory. Man, do kids even know what that is anymore? Where you have to have some idea where to look, and then you go through records, and you say, okay, I can figure it out. What's my ICQ, Noah? Yeah, I used to have an ICQ when I was in college. Yeah, I'm not that old, but MSN Messenger old. Yep. Unreal says had an advisor in the early 90s who was a huge Gopher fan and ran on his Next Step. Yikes. I never saw Next Step. Okay. Yeah, I remember writing PHP and SQL code to do a recursive Yahoo-style listing of my bookmarks. That's funny. Yeah, I always forget, the demographic on Twitch is, tech people, so some of you guys know way more than I do. I remember using it as, a kid, but, yeah. No, you're not way off topic. We're just joking about, this is a 2009 paper referencing an app from 2005. Who knows how long this was, under review, how long this has been sitting on Floridi's desk before he got it published. So it's yeah. So, I mean, think about the argumentative strategy here. This is taking Bayes' formula as something more fundamental. This is more of an epistemic position on reasoning. He said, given certain information I know, what is it to, what should I then conclude? Your prior probabilities. What do you know? What do you think the state of the world is? You're not doing logic. It's just taking the Bayes' theorem as more fundamental, as many people like to do. This is not a crazy idea, but you can see that if you misconstrue the probability that you plug into Bayes, you get out different logical relations than you might have thought. And that's what Floridi is saying is going on here. People are reacting more Bayes-like, but in practice, that looks like logical fallacies. All Cost Money says, I remember deploying Scripta in IRC and AIM with the full internet, steal info, and gain access to things. Wow, yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't know no Scripta. Okay. All right, so that's what... This is some amateur psychology, though. This is Floridi making up stories about possible ways to justify people making logical errors. He's saying, given bad information being fed into Bayes, then you get logical fallacies out. This is him saying, think he's just projecting that people are feeding bad information into Bayes or don't understand Bayes very well. That might be the case, but again, he's just, making shit up. Okay, on the other hand, if there are some false positives, that is, the probability of A is greater, that, the complement, the false positive is greater than 0, then the chance of the everything being good is less than 1, and the formula bears a strong resemblance to the affirming the consequent fallacy, which is what Maggie might have also had in mind. Yeah, so it's like if you're just a little bit close to it, it looks kind of like that, like affirming the consequent. Either way, Maggie was taking a shortcut. She disregarded the probabilities to focus on the sort of information that she could extract from the fact that those emails were in the quarantine folder. On the wise advice of being safe rather than sorry, she treated all its contents as dangerous. The result is that Maggie is ontologically thrifty. She trusts many less items than Jill by being logically greener. She relies on a reasoning that, although formally fallacious, can still be recycled to provide a quick and dirty way of extracting useful information from her environment. If this is unclear, the reader may try this other example. No, I mean, I don't like how he's saying this, because in the 90s we knew this. This is the heuristics. We use heuristics to reason, and doing exact probabilities takes time, but I know all of y'all love your thinking fast, thinking slow. This is the thinking fast thing. You're not doing the fancy Bayes calculation. You're doing the quick and dirty Bayes calculation, and that looks like logical fallacies sometimes. And that's not a bad idea. Now, I don't love the thinking fast, thinking slow stuff, but of course people use heuristics. Of course we use heuristics. And if you're using a probabilistic heuristic, this is not that crazy of an idea, that given some heuristic Bayes-like thought, we're getting things that look like logical fallacies. Try again, reader. Exactly. It's like, this is Luciano going, I know you're dumb. Let me explain it to you again. Okay? Literally what's happening here. He's just like, let me do this again because I know you're dumb. Okay. Thanks, Luciano. Maggie's teacher tells her that if she does not study enough, then she will fail her exam. Unfortunately, Maggie does fail her exam, and the teacher reproaches her for not having studied enough. Maggie has learned her Bayesian lesson, so she knows that the teacher's reasoning is fallacious, but she also knows that it is fairly accurate as a shortcut that gets things right most of the time. On average, students who fail their exams have not studied enough. The teacher should simply have simply sprinkled her inference and then judgment with some probably and most likely clauses. Basically, affirming the consequent fallacy is Bayes' theorem stripped of some of its probabilities. The less the probabilities count, the closer the fallacy is to a reasoning that is logically valid. Chocolate says, came across the idea that people naturally only think inductively until they are taught deductive logic. That's fair. Most people, you don't need to do deductive logic. You just don't. To do a lot of things in this world, you don't need deductive logic. And so it's like, it is a bit of a specialized skill. Like, you can get by just fine on only some kinds of reasoning. It's not a big deal. The case for the something the antecedent fallacy is analogous. Denying the antecedent is analogous. Given the same interpretations for AB, AC, and BC, Jill calculates through Bayes' theorem the probability that the email is not blocked by the interviewer is given the fact that it is not infected. That is, the probability of the consequent of AC given the probability of the consequent of B. In this case too, if there are no false positives, that is, if the consequent of A given B is 0, then the consequent of A given the consequent of B is 1, and the formula is again degraded to a double implication. A only of B, not A, therefore not B, which is perfectly valid. If there are some false positives, as the probability of not A given B is greater than 0, then the consequence, the probability of the complement of A given the complement of B is less than 1, and the formula bears strong family resemblance to the denying the antecedent fallacy, A then B, not A, therefore not B. The DA denying the antecedent fallacy is also Bayes' theorem stripped of some of its probabilities. We are now ready for an overall interpretation. Okay, Adam says, oh, let's see a small flex. When I was a kid in school, early to mid 80s, the first PC game I ever played was on an IBM computer running MS-DOS 2.1, played Mickey's Space Adventure. There you go. Vintage MLK, what's up? You're too tired for this? I'm sorry, but feel free to lurk. I know, this is a little bit of technical philosophy, but the overall idea is not crazy. I was just explaining before, if people are doing stuff kind of probabilistically in their life, but they're doing it quick, the way that like people are reasoning, if Bayes is even partially correct, breaks down along these common fallacy lines. And it's not a crazy thought that if people are reasoning heuristically with probabilities, that this could be happening. Formal fallacies and their Bayesian interpretation. Consider figure 3. Alright, so that's this down here. This is 3. In row 1, all 4 schemes introduce if phi then psi. If we interpret if phi then psi informationally, it means that there are no false negatives. In our example, if the email is infected, then the antivirus blocks it. Most polens and most tolens rely only on this information, so there is no need for probabilities. However, denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent also assume, and here's the logical mistake, that there are no false positives. Double implication, or that if there are, they are so improbable as to be disregarded, degraded Bayes' theorem. So denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent are Bayesian, quick and dirty informational shortcuts. When we use them, we bet that if A then B, B therefore A, or that if A then B, not A, therefore not B. The bet might be risky, we might be wrong, but it often pays back handsomely in terms of lower amount of informational resources needed to reach a conclusion. See the case of the teacher assessing whether Maggie studied enough. Yeah, I mean, if you fail a test, it may be because you had some like family tragedy the other day. You did study, but you're just too exhausted to take the test. This happens all the fucking time. I mean, how many grandmas die on the day of the test? It's just amazing. So, but like, it's not a crazy idea though that if you're just cutting down on your the probabilistic load you have to think about, then yeah, you might be reasoning in these ways. Moreover, it is easy to show that the information gain increases, the bets are less risky, the more the following conditions are satisfied. So soundness, A is true, then A implies B is valid. Relevance, A and B are relevantly related and not independent. The occurrence of A affects the occurrence of B meaningfully, not as in if Paris is the capital of France, then bachelors are unmarried, but more as in if Paris is the capital of France, then Lyon is not the capital of France. And constraints, 3, we assume A1 through A2 to AK to be mutually exclusive events whose union is the whole sample space of an experiment, and B to be an event with probability greater than 0. A equals B is A then B and then B then A. Yes, you can define it that way. But, yeah, I mean, you have to say more. Like, again, this is about what happens if you're looking at things probabilistically, like if A then B is a probabilistic thing. If A, then with 99% then B. Okay, well what happens if you assume all the way, then if A then B, that's modus ponens. But if you're saying 99%, then you have to, adjust. And like Bayes' theorem allows for that. But let me know if you meant something different. Advantages of the Bayesian interpretation of formal logical fallacies. Oh, you're halfway there with A then B? Yeah, you're living on a prayer. Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Okay, the greener approach to denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent just presents several advantages. First, and quite interestingly, parallel results have been recently achieved in the Bayesian analysis of informational fallacies. Quote, 3 classic reasoning fallacies, argumentum ad ignorantiam, the circular argument or petitio principii, and the slippery slope argument, match structurally arguments which are widely accepted. This suggests that it is not the form of the arguments as such that is problematic, but rather something about the content of those examples with which they are typically justified. This leads to a Bayesian reanalysis of these classic argument forms and a reformulation of the conditions under which they do or do not constitute legitimate forms of argumentation. The convergence is remarkably and probably significant. Humans reason in many different ways, only few of which are captured by mathematical logic, as cognitive science is increasingly showing. One thing I just realized is you got to remember those the informal logical arguments. This is turning all the logical fallacies, the informal logical fallacies, this is turning all the formal logical fallacies into informal fallacies of Bayesian reasoning. That's what this is doing. This is doing shortcuts of Bayesian reasoning, of rhetoric using probability. That's what this is. It's not that we are denying logical fallacies. It's that we are recasting all the logical fallacies in terms of Bayesian argumentation, and then all of these are informal uses of Bayesian argumentation. So that's what's going on here. Second, the Bayesian interpretation is consistent with recent work on the interpretation of 1. Abductive as inference to the best explanation, 2. The affirming the consequent fallacy as a form of inference to the best explanation, and inference to the best explanation in Bayesian terms. It all turns out to be a bit too consistent to be accidental. If we accept the previous Bayesian interpretation of denying the antecedent and affirming the consequent, the following quote acquires a very interesting meaning. Quote, it has become common in AI to identify abduction with backwards modus ponens, that is, affirming the consequent, or with backwards modus ponens together with constraints on the set of conclusions that are allowable with backwards modus ponens with syntactic constraints. There is a burden on those who study restricted forms of backwards modus ponens to show us the virtues of their particular forms. They need to show us how they are smart. I suggest that they will find that backwards modus ponens is smart to the degree that it approximates, or when it is controlled and constrained to approximate, or when it implements inference to the best explanation. Okay, this is slightly annoying to me. This is Charles Sanders Peirce, since semiotics are still here, knew about the inverse relationship between modus ponens and abduction. He defined it this way. He defined it as the reversing the order. It was just that you had to find a different the question what you were going on. Inference to the best explanation is modus ponens but flipped upside down. Like, this is not new thoughts. It's just that they've combined it with the Bayesian stuff, which is funny. Epic show, thank you. So this is a little bit of not understanding the history of logic or Charles Sanders Peirce, and because this was all out there a long time ago. But the fact that the artificial intelligences, and this is not the current LLMs, this is 2000s level artificial intelligences, so this is not the same kind of AIs that we're dealing with now. These are very different. We didn't have the large language models back then. You have to realize that these are old model AIs, so this is not the current batch of them. So, but like the fact that they were going this way may have already been built into the logic. I don't know. Okay. In the email example, affirming the consequent is read as an inference to the best explanation or retrodiction effort. The email was blocked because it was probably infected, whereas denying the antecedent is read as an inference to the best explanation or inference to the best prediction effort. The email is not infected, so it will probably not be blocked. Have I installed Olama? I don't know what that is. Third, formal fallacies are interpreted in terms of information gathering and gain rather than argumentative and dialectical strength, as in post-Aristotelian logic or mathematical utility, as in post-Fregean logic. To put it less cryptically, affirming the consequent and denying the antecedent are still a disaster if our goal is to win an argument, because our opponent will not have to be too smart to provide plenty of counter-arguments. They are also mathematical calamities whenever our goal is to provide valid proofs that convey total certainty and faultless conclusions, for their morphology makes them utterly unreliable. But when it comes to extracting information from whatever is at hand and without too much fuss, they can be serviceable. This point is related to the last advantage, which is best left for the conclusion. Luminant says, but if my thoughts aren't new, how will I get grant funding? Well, yeah. I mean, that's true, but I know it's a joke, but the claim that Floridi was making was that they were getting this result from computer science, even though it had already been recognized 120 years ago, or maybe around 100 years ago at the time of this writing, by Charles Sanders Peirce. Yeah. Conclusion. Rationality regained. Anyone who has taught logic to undergraduates knows that logical fallacies are very common and hard to eradicate. Convincing normal, intelligent, decently educated young minds who have successfully negotiated very complex cognitive tasks for almost 2 decades that their most basic ways of reasoning produce only worthless rubbish takes a while and some effort. No, I agree with me completely. I'm just joking about how the academics are constantly claiming their idea is brand new, even though it's old as fuck. Yeah. I mean, I know it was a joke. New to the grantor? Who's the grantor? Yeah. I mean, I think what Luminance is saying is you can't present your results as like a rehash of, old results. It has to look new in some way. So you don't say that, this is like the computer scientists have gotten around to what the logicians have been saying for 100 years. You say, oh no, this is the computer science is justifying my philosophical theories. So yeah, new to the grantor, yes. Because they're not going to know the history of logic. Or they probably won't. Okay, it is also an unrewarding and tedious task which is not always successful. A common result is the development of a schizophrenic attitude. Life is life and logic has little to do with it. Otherwise put, when in the logic class, do as the teacher does, but then at the pub you can go back to your old habits and infer that if someone has too many drinks and drives, that person will have an accident, and since she did have an accident, she must have been drunk. A greener approach to the way in which we treat fallacies has the advantage of making people see not only the limits of similar ways of reasoning, but also their value, provided one is aware of the sort of epistemic risks one is running. In a way, affirming the consequent and denying the antecedent are very powerful tools. Inferentially, they are the equivalent of a shoot first, ask questions later, developed by embedded and embodied agents to cope as quickly and successfully as possible with the hostile environment. The fact that we have had the leisure in the past few millennia to show how badly logical fallacies serve us when the informational game becomes more refined and subtle, either dialectically or mathematically, should not prevent us from building a healthier relation between life and logic and recognize their potential utility. The sooner we start recycling them, the better. Okay. Yeah, so cool. Yeah, Lumen says, grant committees always want to hear this is brand new idea that will revolutionize the field, and yet every academic needs to win grants, so there are a suspiciously large amount of brand new revolutionary ideas. Exactly. But anyway, here's what we do now. We rate the article we just read. If you have an opinion on it, let me know using these emotes. If you thought this was fun and made your brain dance, give it a brain dance. Spelling and capitalization do count here. If you thought this considered existential or artistic drama, not give it a scream, a nog scream. If you about deeper ancient ideas, nog ouroboros, so it's nog oro. Slicing and dicing arguments, technical stuff, nog knife. If it's navel gazing only for academics, then a nog navel. Nog turd, all style, no substance, still poop underneath, give it a nog turd. And nog grapes for big claims that shrivel up. This happens a lot in philosophy where people do that. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch, and my vote meh. Note that I do calculate an overall score. Anything in the green makes the score go up. Anything in the red makes the score go down. And the vote meh actually makes it all go to the middle. And it does matter if you double up on your emotes. Chocolate Knife says, brain dance, nog knife, and vote yay. Oh, it hates the, what's it called? Commas. So I'll fix that if you don't. But if you want to rewrite them, no commas. That's all. Thank you, Chocolate Mints. I appreciate it. The Luminance gave it a yay and a brain dance. K-Pars gave it a knife and a yay. Chocolate gave it a brain dance, a knife, and a yay. DCI gave it a yay. Cost says, this may be the first VOD I watched. Had to work. Okay. Yeah. I got you. Hey, I appreciate it. Hey, if you got shit to do, as always, please take care of yourself. Twitch is not a necessity. DCI gave it a brain dance. All right, what am I going to think about this? I thought this was fun. I mean, the idea that we are going to use Bayesian reasoning is not a crazy idea even 20 years ago. Bayesian reasoning epistemology has been around longer than that. Reducing the Bayesian reasoning to different logical fallacies, I don't think is even that crazy either. But one thing that this thing is doing, and this is a 20-year-old paper now, or almost, is that this is taking the informational approach, which was kind of new back then. I don't think this is going to be shocking anyone at the moment. K-Pars did enjoy, yeah. Was Spinoza mentioned? Spinoza was not mentioned at all. So, like, this was, the idea that, like, I'm sympathetic. I'm sympathetic to the idea that people actually are rational and that our tools have to sort of figure out what people are doing, not just to tell people that they're wrong. It's like, yeah, people make logical fallacies. Why did they do it? If there was really that bad, people would stop. Why are they doing it? This gives a potential just so story why they act this way. Maybe they're acting in this Bayesian methodology. We would need some experimentation to test them to see if they're actually acting according to Bayesian reasoning or something else. And if it's not the Bayesian reasoning, even though this paper made it seem plausible, what are they doing? Because maybe they're not. This is just like, something worth looking at. But from the informational perspective, it's all right. Unreal Brian says, knife, yay, dance, and a meh. Yeah, I mean, it's good, but it's not like, I don't think it's crazy good. I'm kind of with you on that one, Brian. Maybe don't slap them with the ruler so much, yeah. Lumen says, yeah, my vote is more based on liking the idea than feeling it's revolutionary new. Yeah, I think it's, I like the strategy. So it's like, I'm kind of with Unreal, like giving it kind of between a yay and a meh. I mean, I'm actually kind of on the Nog naval side. This is really, because the only people who care about this are like, oh, the logical fallacies, yes. I mean, like, yeah, people shouldn't be logical fallacies. It's like, all right, is that really, maybe that's not, I don't know. Good night, DCI. Thanks for hanging out. I'm thinking about, like, what I'm trying to say. I mean, I'm going to give it I don't know. I'm still kind of on the fence about all this. I'm going to give it a Nog knife, because this was technical. Give it 2 Nog knives. So I thought this was good technical, and it was kind of like, I'm going to go vote meh a little bit. Adam gave it a vote nay and a navel gazing. It's like, yeah, I kind of feel like it's like maybe, maybe not. It's kind of like in the middle for me. It's not bad, though. Adam says, Mistral is a good lightweight AI model user with Olana. So Olana is an app that runs machine learning models, easily set up and configure. I use it with Mistral for voice assistant, speech to speech, home assistant project, and running locally on my computer. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Lumen says that's fair, but I also feel like it could have some pop relevance as a rebuttal online logical fallacy debate nerds. Yeah, and that's why I was about to go Nog Naval, but then, like, yeah, there's definitely the online community. They'd be like, yeah, well, you're making this logical fallacy. It's like, yeah, but maybe we could start talking about heuristics and reasoning, and once you do that, that's actually not a bad idea. So I am gonna give it a brain dance, I guess, although I kind of feel bad about this. It's like, it's not that much fun. Like, it was okay, it's like, nah, I just can't do it. Like, it wasn't that fun. It was okay. Like, wasn't like giving me like any great ideas, but like, yeah, maybe I'll just give it a vote yay also. So I'll be with Unreal, a yay and a meh, but like, it's gonna get the knives, not no brain dance. But like, this is all right philosophy. Like, I think this is well done. I mean, and Lumens is right. I think that this actually does provide some online relevancy, like contemporary relevancy to sort of like the way many things happen online. Maybe use your brain dance too lightly. No, as always, the emotes are in some sense interpreted by the users here. That's how it goes. A more nuanced response to fallacies. That's fair too, Chocolate. Like, this is trying to like bring in the Bayesian analysis of fallacies, and that's why I gave it 2 knives. I mean, the knife is a good thing. It's in the green. Like, it's really being smart about what could be going on, why people are reasoning in the way they do, and I do like that a lot. And that's why this, I think, is an overall good paper. It shows people aren't as crazy as like the old school way of viewing everything is. Now, I feel like it's short, and that's okay, but like, it's just, it's like, it's all right. Lumen says, I think it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's fun, but I probably wouldn't if I thought about like, oh shit, this just blew my mind. Yeah, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be like the way, like it doesn't have to be all the way on any one side. That's why there's multiple things to like review it with. You can say one of these, one of those. You can give it two of the knives. It's all good. But like yeah. So, but thank you all for rating. I appreciate